Welcome. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join the breakout. My name is Ryan Joswick. I'm honored, I'm blessed to be able to spend the next hour with you. And so why on earth would I be up here talking to you about this, right? Well, I'll tell you why, because I'm passionate about the topic. Over the years, personally, along with mentoring and coaching a wide range of folks, the concepts and strategies that we're going to talk about over the next 60 minutes, I've seen the most dramatic impact in my own life and in others, both personally and professionally. So you're in for a real treat. So let me ask you a question. How many of you have always been able to turn a negative situation into a positive relationship? Always been able to turn a negative situation into a positive relationship. Yeah, listening skills, right? All right. How about this one? Whom here has a relationship, either at work, at Heartland, or personally, that they would like to strengthen over the next coming months, right? So here's what I'm going to ask you to do is grab a piece of paper and a pen, and if you don't have a piece of paper and pen, grab your smartphone, note section, and I'd like you to write that person's name down. Write down the person's name that you want to strengthen that relationship over the coming months. You don't have to share it with me. You don't have to share it with anyone next to you. But we're going to use that later in the presentation.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I missed it. What are we writing down?
You're going to write down, no, good question. You're going to write down the person's name that you want to strengthen a relationship with over the coming months. Okay? And what if I was to tell you that you could double, if not triple, your financial and career success by implementing some of the strategies we're going to talk about today? Would you be interested? All right, I got your attention now. So today we're going to go through really two main categories. The first one being self-aware. So learning how do you become incredibly self-aware of the way you think and the way you process stuff through your five senses. And then how do you manage that awareness so that you can become a master of relationships? Okay? And then some of you are going to get some free gifts because that's always fun. Okay? And at the end, I'm going to leave you 5 strategies on how you can become better at self-awareness and 5 strategies how to become better at self-management that you'll be able to implement this afternoon. You'll be able to apply it right away. So before I do that, can I share a couple stories with you? Awesome. So after spending 12 years with a company called Cintas, I was headhunted out by a venture capital firm called Kleiner Perkins. So Kleiner Perkins is a company that pools together investors' money. And then they take the investors' money and they invest in up-and-coming technology, like disruptive technology, new innovative stuff. So for example, they invested in Google, WebMD, Amazon. And it's usually the 10 and 2 or 10 and 1 rule, meaning for every 10 investments they make, only 1 or 2 of them actually be successful, and the other 8 or 9 fail. High risk, high return. So I moved down to Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, and I was meeting with the CEO of this company. And we went through and talked through, they had probably at the time 10 to 12 offices scattered throughout the state of California. And we went through each office and did kind of a SWOT analysis. We talked about the market, and then we spent a good amount of time talking about each individual leader within an office and the employees within that office. We talked about their strengths, opportunities for improvement. And by the time we got to about location 8 or 9, the CEO took a big, deep breath, leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, exhaled, and I said, ooh, I'm in for a good one here. And he said, let me tell you about this guy named Mike. And so he went on to tell me about Mike, who had been with the company for 4 to 5 years, really since the inception of the company. And he talked about how brilliant Mike was, talented, helped create a lot of the processes, the infrastructure of the company. And then he says, but Mike has an anger management problem. I said, interesting. I said, well, tell me more about it. And he gave me specific examples of times that Mike would say inappropriate stuff, that he would get, I call it emotionally hijacked, and scream at someone during a meeting, right? Or send an email before thinking it through out of emotional response. And so over the coming months, had the opportunity to go and meet Mike and meet his direct reports and his peers and observe his behavior. And sure enough, I found out that he had a anger management problem. And so it was probably 4 months in after giving him feedback. Every time I'd see him act a certain way, I'd give him coaching feedback. And about 4 months into working with him, he approached me. He says, you know, Ryan, up to this point in my life, I've really only had one way of dealing with people. that I feel threatened. Like someone comes at me, I feel like they're threatening my ego or they're challenging my direction. And he goes, it's like I reach into a toolbox and I pull out the one tool I have and I use it. And so for the audience, any guess on when he reaches into that toolbox, what tool he brings out? Yeah, who said that? Right here? All right, give him a round of applause for being the first volunteer. That's exactly right. So he would reach in and he'd pull out a hammer. And when all you have is a hammer, everything else looks like a nail, right? So he'd go around whacking people. Now, thank goodness it wasn't a physical hammer, right? That might have happened in Oakland. We were in Silicon Valley. So it was a metaphor, being that, he would cut people off, he'd raise his voice, he'd become confrontational, and it created a ripple effect of the employees around. Turnover went up, people didn't enjoy, they didn't know what was going to trigger him to go off. And as I got to know him over the coming months, I realized it also impacted his personal life. His friends, even his family, created a little bit of a distance. And probably about 7 to 8 months in of coaching him, working with him, he approached me. Mike says, hey, Ryan, do you remember that conversation we had about the hammer? I said, yeah, Mike, I remember that conversation. And he goes, what's interesting is that in the past, I would reach in there and all I'd have is the hammer, and that's what I would use, because that's all I've ever known. He goes, but now, I feel like when I reach in the toolbox, I have a whole new set of tools. There's no longer just a hammer. I got an Allen wrench. I got a screwdriver, ratchets. And he goes, depending on what the circumstance is, I can choose which tool and strategy to use. So here's someone who is so set in their ways, in doing things very fixed set, right? Now, I know another individual named Jill, very brilliant, very sharp, gregarious, outgoing, and Jill's almost like on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like you could tell her house burnt down and someone just stole her car, and she would say, well, I guess I could build my dream house now, and it's probably time to get a new car. So nothing would bother her. Like it wouldn't bother her. Now, she went to a 3-day function, very similar to the summit, interacting with people and doing her normal stuff, opening the door for people, gregarious, joking around. During cocktail hour, she'd stop and get someone a drink when they're running low. Well, about a day and a half into the event, someone approached her and gave her some feedback. And when the person approached her, she was upset with the feedback. But she dismissed it. She just said, oh, that's that one person. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they had a little too much to drink, right? Well, the second person came and gave her feedback. And so she started getting a little worried. She's like, this isn't good. By the time the third person approached her, she was horrified. And why was she horrified? Because even though that she was happily married, people considered her behavior flirtatious. They thought that she was flirting with all these different people, even though her intention was never to do that. It was to help people and help them feel like they're enjoying the event. And I imagine most of you in the audience can relate with there's been a time where you had the right intentions, you meant to do the right thing, but other people around you construed the behavior differently, right? So you've got Mike on one end of the spectrum that was very fixed in the way he handled situations, and then you've got Jill on the other way, and we're going to learn some strategies that kind of show you the whole scale over the next few minutes, okay? So on this next exercise, what I'd like you to do is sit up in your chair, grab that piece of paper, grab a pen, and if you don't have that, use your smartphone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show a series of pictures on the screen. And what I want you to do is you're going to write down the name of the picture. So whatever the picture means to you, you're going to write down what it means, okay? Each picture is only going to be up there for about 3 to 4 seconds, so it's going to go really quick. And just think of the name of the picture that it means to you and the first emotion. What's the emotion you feel to that picture? Write it down. So for example, if there was a mountain with a snowboarder coming down, I might write mountain, or I might write snowboarder, and my emotion would be adrenaline, okay? But it could be different for you, okay? So here's the first picture. So you're going to write down what the name of that picture is to you and what the corresponding motion is to that picture. Second picture. I write down the name of the picture and the corresponding emotion. Next picture. Next picture. Yep, that's the idea. Next picture. You're writing down what the picture means and the emotion. We got seats up front too if you want some. That's okay, if that's what it means to you. Okay, next picture. Whoop, whoop. Okay, next picture. And this is the last picture. Okay. So as you're looking at the different labels that you have on the page for the various pictures, and you're looking at the different emotions that you have, you probably notice that there's a bit of a range between the emotions and the pictures. And the last picture that was up there with the girl swinging around and the hair flowing in the wind and the big smile on her face, when I see that, it brings an enormous amount of joy to me. And partly because I've got 3 little girls, and so I can relate with that experience and that emotion. Now, if I would have seen that picture 10 years ago, it would have been a very different emotion. Probably because I didn't have kids at that time, and my association would have been babysitting my cousins or nephews, or it would have been on a plane with a crying kid trying to get work done. So as you have these different experiences in your life, you develop these different emotions, and I call them filters, what we're going to talk about a little bit later. And so that picture probably meant the most to me. So what I'd love to do is hear from someone in the audience, what's one of the pictures that meant the most to you, and what was the emotion associated with it? Okay. Let's give a round of applause for volunteering. And you get a book. Let's see. Hello. Try to turn it on again for you. Testing, testing. Oh, we need another one. Good? I don't think. Is it on? It's not on.
I can eat.
There we go. We're live.
All right. So my picture that stood out the most was the one with the baby holding the parent's finger.
Okay.
I have a 5-year-old, so that one made the most connection to me, and mine was love. That
Love.
Was attached to that.
Awesome. Good. Thank you for sharing. Who else would like to share? I'll come over there. I saw your hand up. I'll grab you a book.
Mine was the beach because it's cold out. No. We went to Costa Rica for the Heartland trip, and just mine word was love for it as well.
For the beach?
Yes.
Trade you. You're right.
Mine was the veteran with the 2 kids holding his hands, and I put patriot and the kids' loyalty.
Good. And what's the emotion you felt?
Well, the emotion I felt was the fact that I served in the military, and you know, I walk with my kid, and he holds my hand, and it's kind of cool.
Awesome.
So,
Good. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, I like the one with the military when they're going into battle, and to me that was you know, honor and a great sense of pride in what those people do. So that's one that touched me the most.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, anyone else? Got a lot of people up here.
The dog and the cat really reached out to me. It said friendship, it said love, and if I wasn't for my friends, there's so many things I wouldn't have been able to get through in life, and I really appreciate that friendship, so that's what that said to me. You know, they're holding you tight.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. All right, one last one. Ooh, thank you.
So it was the tsunami, and I just can't imagine the pain and loss that those people felt.
Yeah, really, right? Good. Thank you for sharing. So as you see those different pictures, and if I took the time to poll everyone in the room here, we could have the exact same picture up on the screen, and various folks would feel different emotions for the same picture. And often I'm asked, well, why is that? Well, I'm going to talk about it. So at a high level, how your brain works is you have a stimulus comes in through your five senses, okay? And you feel an emotion before you logically think about what it means, okay? So you feel emotions, and then you logically understand what they mean, okay? And we're going to come back to this a little bit later. So how your brain works is you have your five senses. So you see, right? You hear audio. Kinesthetic is feeling or doing, right? Olfactory, smell, gustatory, taste. So at any given moment, you're being bombarded with billion bits of information. Like right now, me speaking with you, you're hearing me, right? You're seeing my nonverbal. And what happens is it goes through a series of filters in your brain and filters out what it means to you. And partly is because your brain cannot process, even though your brain is the most powerful organ in your entire body, it cannot physically process the amount of information coming in. So for example, you probably did not consciously, or you consciously were not aware of the feeling of your seat on your bottom until I just said so. Or maybe your toe, your big toe inside your right shoe that you could wiggle right now. Right? Even though the toe was always there, I didn't just put it on. What happens is your mind goes through a process of deleting, distorting, or generalizing everything that's coming in. It's through what's called the reticular activating system. Okay? Marketers have mastered this. Okay? And so based on where you grew up, based on the schools you went to, based on the friends in your family and their beliefs and the values, the religion, forms what I call as filters. There's this series of filters inside your mind. So when something comes in through your five senses, it goes through a set of filters, and then it tells you what it means. So even though I'm saying the exact same thing right now, the meaning that each of you are taking is probably something very different. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a series of exercises to show you this, so you can experience it real time. Sound good? Okay. So the first one is you'll see there's just a bunch of scrambled letters up on the screen. Okay? And for some of you in the audience, you're actually able to read what that says. And you're learning that there was a study done at Cambridge University where they found that if you had the first letter and you had the last letter of the word, you could actually make a meaning of the word and then be able to make a meaning of the sentence and then the paragraph. And so this is an example of your mind generalizing what something means. Now, there's some in the audience that still can't see that. It looks like just a jumbled mess. Okay? The next one is a contest. Yes? We're going to get to that. Good question. Overachiever here. Okay. We're going to get to that. So the next one's a contest. Okay? And there's a prize. So what you're going to do is you've got to pay attention because it's going to go really fast. And you're going to count the number of times the people in the white shirt pass the basketball. Okay? So the number of people in the white shirt, you got to count how many times are they passing the basketball. Okay?
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
How many?
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
So how many of you got 13? How many of you got the moonwalking bear the first time? How many of you got the moonwalking bear the second time? How many of you got the moonwalking bear the third time? Okay, good, because I didn't show it the third time. So how many of you got 13 and saw the moonwalking bear the first time? One, right? So what's interesting here is why did we not see it? Okay, we're watching the white. Focused? Not on that. And think about how many times in the working environment we're so focused on a task at hand. We got a project we got to do, and all these things are going on around us. Even though they're happening, we're losing sight of it. Right? And part of developing strong relationships with people is understanding what's going on around you at all times, being really aware of it. Because you could really miss out on an opportunity of having an engaging conversation with someone or building trust with someone because we're so focused on the task at hand. Make sense? So the next one. So when you look at this picture, how many of you see the young woman? Okay? How many of you see the old woman? How many of you see both? Yeah. And in a moment, I'm going to point them both out to you. And some of you will be able to see it, and then some of you will not be able to see it. Okay? And some of you, I will point it out and you'll see it, and then if I showed you the picture in 5 minutes from now, you would not be able to see it. So the young woman is pointed this way, okay? And her nose is here, her eyes there. This is her chin, her neck, and then her hair, okay? The old woman is pointed more this way, and this is actually her nose, right? That's her eye, her mouth, and her chin, and her hair. Yeah. Okay, so the old woman, okay, this is her nose, okay, this is her hair going up, this is her eye, right, her mouth, her chin, okay? So for some of you who can't see it, it's called a blind spot. It's called a scotoma. So even though it's there, based on the experiences you've had up to this point in your life, you have a blind spot. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So there's a couple psychologists in the 1950s that were fascinated with how people perceive themselves and how other people perceive them. And they created what's called Johari's window. How many of you ever heard of Johari's window? A couple people? So Joe and Harry were the ones that created this. And really what it was is it's a tool for people to understand how they see themselves and how other people see them. And it's like a window pane. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner, it shows the sun setting, it's clear, right? And what that means is it's known to me, and it's also known to others. So it's like I have blonde hair, blue eyes. I know it, you know it. The lower left is masked, so it's not known to others, but it's known to me. So that would be fears, insecurities, limiting beliefs, embarrassing moments, right? We all have them, and we just keep them close to our chest. The upper right would be a blind spot, which would be known to others, but not known to yourself. So how many of you have ever done a 360-degree performance review? Right, a couple folks? So with a 360 performance review, you would have a series of questions that you would ask or answer. And it would be about, how well do you work with others, and what type of work do you do, and are you punctual, and the quality of work. And you would go in and rate yourself, and then all your peers around you would rate you. If you have direct reports, they would rate you. Your boss would rate you. And what I've noticed over the years from facilitating them is that this is what I normally see, is people will rate themselves, like here, and then other people, their peers, direct boss, will rate them here. So what that means is that this person's overly critical of themselves. There's a gap, okay? The other thing I see is people rate themselves here, right? And others will rate them opposite, down here. And that means others see them not performing as well as they see themselves. There's a gap. There's always a gap. It's just a matter how big is the gap. Okay? It's all about perception. So can I do another exercise with you? Okay, so sit up in your chair. So there was and what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a series of steps. And what I want you to do is just follow the directions. It's not super advanced. Have fun with it. And go along with me. So take your dominant hand. So this would be the hand that you eat food with, you write with, okay? So whatever hand you use the most to eat food with, write with, so take that hand, and you're going to snap your fingers 5 times with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take your pointer finger, okay, and write the capital E on your forehead. Capital E on your forehead. Okay? Got it? So how many of you wrote the capital E that looked like this? So when you wrote it on your forehead, it was backwards, but you can see it like this. Okay? And how many of you wrote the capital E like this? It looks straight on your forehead, but it was backwards now. Okay? And so this study's been around for 25, 30 years. It was created back in the 1980s. And what it is it's to test the way you perceive situations. So you snapping your finger was a placebo effect. It had nothing to do with the exercise. It's just I got a smart group in the room and I'm just throwing you off. It was all about the letter E. So if you wrote it on the left side, the letter E backwards on your forehead, it showed in a natural state you're more likely to take someone else's perception on a situation. Now, if you wrote it like the one on the right, you're more likely to take your own perception in the natural state. Very, very powerful exercise. I would also recommend if you do this, make sure you use an erasable marker, okay? Because I took my daughter's marker, I did one of them, and it did not come off very good. And I was halfway in, so I had to do the other one. Yes?
I'm sorry. When you put the first picture up, I was picturing that being me with the things pointing that way. So is this supposed to be looking at a mirror, or
Nope.
is that how I drew it?
That's how you drew it.
Okay.
That's it. Okay?
If I look in the mirror, then it's
It would be. But that's how other people see it. So if you wrote it like an E, like you're looking at the E, it would be backwards for everyone else. But if you wrote it backwards in your mind, other people see it like a normal E. Yes? Good. That's the first time I've had that happen. I love it. That's good. I love it. Thank you for sharing. That's great. So, I love it. So when we talk about Johari's window, the last box is the unknown. So the unknown normally has to do with cultural. So we don't know it because it's not part of the culture. So for example, my sister back in December, she's a nurse practitioner, they took $2 million worth of medicine that was donated, and they put them in 38 suitcases, and they boarded a plane and went to Africa with some doctors, and they did a missionary trip. And they went out in the middle of the bush to treat less fortunate people. And there was one gentleman who had so much wax and dust built up in his ears, he was deaf for 5 years. He couldn't hear a thing. And they put saline drops and some other medicine in their ears every day for 6 days. On the 6th day, he could hear. And everyone thought it was a miracle, right? And it was modern medicine and it cost $2 to $3. Now, the thing is my sister will never look at the world the same way after going into that experience where you go somewhere where they have no electricity, no running water, the poorest of the poor, and giving them something that we would spend on a Starbucks coffee, right? So that's the kind of the unknown box. So if we look at these boxes, which box would we want to expand and which box would we want to shrink? Which one? Expand? No? Close. No? Yeah, clear. So what you want to do is you want to expand known to me and known to others. You want to make that box bigger, right? So you're more congruent, right? You're not wearing multiple faces, different personalities. You know, at home you have one personality. At work you have one personality. Church you have one personality. Soccer camp you have one personality. You want to be as congruent as possible. People know who you are and you know who they are, okay? And so we want to shrink the other one. So how do we shrink known to others only box? Become more self-aware. And how? What would we do? Listen. Close. What's the opposite of listening? I heard it. Ask questions. Who said that? You get a book. Nice job. Yeah, you ask questions. So you seek to understand. You're welcome. Good job. Other people's feedback. So hey, what type of friend have I been the last week, the last month? What type of employee have I been over the last month? What type of spouse have I been? What type of father, mom have I been? You ask for feedback. Now, here's the challenging part. What happens when you ask feedback? You get feedback. I bet you everyone in the room is really good at asking the question, are we very good at receiving the feedback? That's usually what I notice is people will get defensive and they'll bite the hand that feeds them. Right? So if you ask the question, you have to be willing to accept the feedback. And just when you get the feedback, it doesn't mean it's true. It just means that's someone's perception. And you have two things you can do. You know what those two things are? Accept it or reject it, yeah. So you can either accept it and say, okay, I'm going to change that behavior, because I agree with their feedback and I'm going to be in line. Or you can say, I'm going to change the way they perceive my behavior. I'm not going to change my behavior. I'm just going to influence them to see it a different way. Or the third thing is you can do nothing. Okay? Known to me and only me, and others don't know it, how do we shrink that box? We share. Yeah, exactly. So we tell other people about ourselves. Now, how many of you have seen how many of you seen the old sitcom, The Office? Right? That's an example what not to do. Right? They share too much stuff. Right? You're going to get yourself in trouble there. So, you got to have a governor on it. But you share stuff. So, for example, a couple months ago, I took my DM team together and I did what's called an assimilation exercise. So I have 5 questions where they get to ask me a series of probably 100 different questions, and I get to tell them stuff and learn about me as a leader, about my favorite foods, worst experiences, leadership style, all the stuff that you normally would take years to uncover, you can unpack in 3 to 4 hours. Very, very powerful exercise. I've done them for a decade now. So, and the whole goal is for people to get to know you as an individual. Okay? So there was a famous author in the 1930s that wrote a book. And how many of you have ever read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People? Right? Yeah. Oldie but goodie. Right? And Dale Carnegie wrote the book. He wrote some other books. But what he said, what was fascinating is that humans aren't creatures of logic, but they're creatures of emotion. Right? So if you remember that, we feel before we logically think. So from an awareness standpoint, what's important to understand is that first you have to become incredibly aware of what's going on around you, just like we saw with the video with the monkey or the gorilla. We saw the young and old woman, right? And if you're not paying attention, you could miss something, right? And once you become aware of it, it's how do you manage that awareness? Right? And having a perception. So there was once a gentleman that was on a bus, and he was doing his business commute because he didn't want to drive, and there's a lot of traffic, and he's reading his newspaper. And he's sitting there enjoying himself, reading the newspaper, and these kids are running up and down the aisle, and they're bumping into him, and they're bumping into other people, and they're screaming and hollering, and the businessman was getting really frustrated. You could just tell him getting. And he'd look over at the dad, and the dad's just looking down at the ground. And in his mind, he's thinking, how on earth could this dad just let his kids run wild on the bus? Like disturbing people, interrupting people. And finally, after the kids bumped into this newspaper like 3 or 4 times, he finally leaned over to the dad and said, excuse me, sir, can you do something about your kids? Like, they're disrupting everyone on the bus. Like, this is really frustrating. And the father looks up, and his eyes are really red, and tears are just coming down his face. And he says, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize it, and we just came from the hospital, and they just lost their mother. And I don't think they know how to handle it, and personally, I don't think I know how to handle it either. And from that day forward, Stephen Covey always took the understanding of, I'm going to seek to understand before being understood. Because you don't know what's going on in someone else's life. Maybe you get a heated email, and your tendency is to fire off another email and share, tell them who's in charge, right? Versus taking a couple extra moments and asking them additional questions to find out what's going on in their life, right? Anyone who has kids, you can relate with that, right? Because they'll push those buttons left and right, right? And so Dale Carnegie, another author, right? He writes about how do you influence people versus controlling people. And the first thing is becoming, one, incredibly self-aware of yourself. And the next one we're going to talk about is how do you manage that awareness, okay? So you saw this picture earlier. And what I want you to do is pay attention to this, because the next video I want you to watch is I want you to notice what are the trigger points, what's causing Terry to feel an emotion, and how is he reacting from that emotion before he's logically thinking about it, okay? How many of you watched the Super Bowl 2 months ago? Right? How many of you watched it for the actual game? How many of you watched it for the commercials? Okay, so the next one is an actual commercial from the Super Bowl. Now, it's a couple years old, okay? But what I like about it is it proves the concept in a very, very extreme, weird way. You ready? All right.
When we asked Reebok to send us Terry Tate, some people thought we were crazy. but I'm a firm believer in paradigm breaking, outside the box thinking.
Hey, buddy.
Break was over 15 minutes ago, Mitch!
And since Terry's been with us, our productivity has gone up 46%. We're getting more from our employees than ever before.
You know you need a cover sheet on your TPS reports, Richard. That ain't new, baby.
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Janice.
But what's really impressed me is how Terry's become part of the Felcher family.
You get high, baby.
He fits right in here.
That's a long distance call, Doug.
To be honest, I wish Reebok sent us 10 Terry Tates.
You want to play games, Gene? Well, when it's game time, it's pain time, baby.
Okay, so a little extreme, huh? I would hope we never see that in Heartland, right? Maybe we see it in a different form. So the perceived threat comes in, right? In this case, what were some of the examples of the perceived threat? Corporate way, no cover sheet, right? Playing solitaire, because I got a new high score, right? Got up and did a little dance and got taken down. So there's a perceived threat, and then there was the emotional response, how Terry reacted, right? Saw it, reacted, okay? And so what happens is you have a perceived threat, the emotional response, and fight or flight. And there's a chemical reaction that happens in your body. You have adrenaline and cortisol pumping through your body. And the thing is it as we saw in the previous picture, you feel before you logically think, right? So you're gonna feel an emotion, and that's where you may send an email in a hasty reaction or have a conversation with someone and then later regret it, right? I know personally, I've ran around the house upset that the kids took my keys. Where are the keys? Where are the keys? I know they took them. My wife said, I don't think they took them. I took them. Ah, this is embarrassing. Right, and they're in my hand, right? Because I didn't stop and pause and just think, okay, I'm getting angry, I'm getting upset. And so the whole point is, this next slide is very, very powerful. If you get anything out of this, this is probably the most powerful one. The stimulus comes in through the 5 senses, right? And you have a choice on how you react. So if you decide to act without thinking about it, you act without thinking, most likely it's going to lead to a negative response. Something negative is going to happen. Now, if you choose to act and think through it, I call it the choice point, and you logically think through the situation long enough to where the chemical reaction, physical chemical reaction in your body can die down and you can logically think something through, it's most likely going to lead to a more positive response. So in this next video, I want you to keep this chart in mind while you watch it. And the next one is an actual true story based on the US Navy. So pay attention to the conversation taking place over the radio, and also pay attention to the body language that you notice. And afterwards, we're going to talk about what you noticed, what was the stimulus, okay? Did they act without thinking? And then what do you think the future response, whether negative or positive, is, okay? So.
Again, this is the USS Montana requesting that you immediately divert your course 15 degrees to the north to avoid a collision. Over.
Please divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid collision.
This is Captain Hancock. You will divert your course. Over.
Negative, Captain. I'm not moving anything. Change your course. Over.
So, this is the USS Montana, the second largest vessel in the North Atlantic Fleet. You will change course 15 degrees north, or I will be forced to take measures to ensure the safety of this ship. Over.
This is a lighthouse, mate. It's your call. Hello, Captain.
Lighthouse.
I think he's gone. Fair enough.
So what did we notice? What was the stimulus? Getting told no. Pushed around by someone else. Right? Stubborn. Was there ego involved? Yeah, right? US Montana, yeah. So did they act without thinking? So what was some of the behavior we noticed that were they acting without thinking? Tense, grab the mic. Yeah. Voice. Bully. What about the person on the other end of the radio? What'd you notice? Did they help come to a solution quickly? No. Right? They kind of agged it on a bit. Because what could they have said? Yeah, right? Like, I can't move. I'm a lighthouse. And what about the captain? The captain probably could have said, well, why won't you move? Right? And think of how many times in the working environment you see emails, right, where there's just a little bit of gray and you just see them getting escalated, right? And you're CC'd on them and you can see people going back and forth. And I know I personally see them and eventually I say, stop emailing, pick up the phone, right? Before you start sending nukes across the states, right? So the stimulus came in and the choice point, really, they acted without thinking it through. And what about the nonverbal communication? Did you notice the gentleman, the smirk, right? Like, oh, he's going to show them. And what's interesting is you can Google it and it'll actually show you, it'll give a recording of the actual true event. And it's quite humorous. There's a little bit of a language barrier. And the person in the lighthouse actually goes on and talks about, sarcastically, after they talk about how many nukes they have on the boat and how they're going to blow them up, they go on to talk about how they have 2 pairs of shoes and they're in a lighthouse and they have a dog and a cat and 1 sandwich. And like, it's quite humorous actually. But it did. It wasn't. And it got escalated. And you think about it, there's probably times where people end up dying because things get escalated and out of control. Okay? So let's talk about some strategies. And we're going to first start with self-awareness. So these are the top 5 strategies to become more self-aware. Okay? So the first one is separate yourself from your behavior. Right? So what that means is often, let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever given someone feedback and they've gotten defensive? Right? And here's why a lot of times is people have a hard time separating themselves from their behavior. Right? They think they are their behavior. Right? Or they have an idea and you shoot it down and they take it really personally. And so the better you can get at disassociating yourself from your behavior. Right? Because you're so much more than your behavior. Your behavior is just a byproduct. We make mistakes, you learn from it.
Kind of like with parenting, they teach you to talk about the behavior, not the person.
Exactly.
So it's not that you're lazy, it's that the behavior you need to learn is pick up your socks.
That's it. And so the first one is if you can learn to really separate yourself from your behavior, 1, you'll live a happier life, right? Because you won't get so stressed out because it's only short term. You can change behavior. And 2, you gain an understanding or an appreciation for not only yourself but other people. Second one, clarity around your core values. Right? So my coach once had me do an exercise. I spent 3-4 days in the mountains just thinking through what's most important to me in my life. Right? What's most important in everything that I do. And we narrowed it down to 10 core values. And everything I do is driven off those core values. Every morning, they pop up in my calendar. I look through them. When decisions come up, those choice point boxes come up in my life, my core values is what drives it. Right? And so if you're not crystal clear on what your own personal core values are, you will always be a master or a servant to someone else. You'll be like a boat floating in the ocean without the sail up. So the more you can get clarity on your core values. So I'll give you an example. So someone once called up, not too long ago, 6 months ago, and asked for a job reference. And I said, great, I can give you a job reference. What would you like me to tell them? What are the job? And he says, hey, and also, can you let them know that I've been, I was at that company, for a year and a half. I was like, but you were there for like 5 months. Because I know, but I told him a year and a half. I said, no, actually that's a conflict with my core values, so I'm not able to do that. And it was like this silence. He goes, I respect that. It was like, it wasn't even a choice. It was like, okay, it's my core values, this is what I do. Okay? So get really clear on that. Who and what pushes your buttons? Get really crystal clear on what pushes your buttons. I was once coaching a leader, and I noticed an email came in, and her body got tense. You could see the color in her face change. And talking with her, you could tell that the tension and the anger. So someone sent an email, and she got emotionally hijacked from the email, right? And I told her, I said, that is a trigger point. Right there, you saw an email, and it caused you to get emotionally hijacked. So don't check your email at 8 o'clock at night, right? Because you don't sleeping well, you just told me earlier, that's not going to help it, right? So you got to find out what pushes your buttons. Like for me, I've learned to really choose wisely with my choice points, but my little kids, they push those buttons, right? Like they're able to push just the right button. And I'll tell you a story about that a little bit later. I've got a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 7-year-old. All girls. Yeah. Oh, all right. My sister got all the boys, I got all the girls. Right? So observe the ripple effect. So the ripple effect would be, if you're standing in front of a water and you grab a little stone and you throw it out, and after the little splash, you see the ripple. So every time you have a conversation with someone, you're either bringing them up or bringing them down. People don't stay neutral, right? And every time you react to a situation, so in the video with the Navy ship, right, you think about the ripple effect on the employees towards that captain later, right? They might lose trust in that person's decision-making ability, the way they handle difficult situations. No different than if you respond to an email without really understanding, or get angry with someone on a bus without realizing the whole situation, right? So just understand what the ripple effect is. And then the last one, seek feedback. Ask people for feedback. How am I doing? What can I do better? Sometimes that makes people really uncomfortable, asking for feedback. I tell my bosses, I say, and I be honest with them, I say, hey, I sometimes exhaust my managers because I ask them for a lot of feedback. So keep it coming, good and bad, keep it coming, right? And then I take it, I adjust, tweak. Yes?
When they give you bad feedback, how do you respond to it would be the question.
Separate myself from behavior. I say, can you give me specific examples of that behavior? So can you give me specific
So if you're asking your DMs for feedback and they say, you know what, Ryan, you just do this too much, it drives me nuts.
Great.
So now,
Can you give me an example of the last time I did that? Okay. Well, next time in the future, if you could, when you see me do that, if you could pull me off to the side and just give me feedback, that would be great. That's how I handle it. Yeah. So seek feedback, okay? Good question. 5 strategies for self-management. Oxygen infusion. What does that mean? Breathe. Right? Fancy way of saying breathe. So, how long can we live without oxygen? 3 minutes? How long can we live without water? 3 days, if not longer, actually. So I think they say after about 5 minutes you become brain dead without oxygen. And so most of the time we spend hunched over in front of a desk with a computer, right? Or sitting in a car, and you're taking shallow breaths. And carbon monoxide builds up in your body, and the oxygen travels through your blood system, and it nourishes your muscles, and it gives you energy. So you get that afternoon kind of slump, like, ugh. So you have some coffee, you have some sugar, you get a spike, and then you crash again. So I'm going to teach you a technique that you can do. Would you like that? So sit up in your chair, and I'm going to teach you a breathing technique that you can do. And you do a couple series of these a day, and you'll get an extra boost of energy, right? So you're sitting in a meeting, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to fall asleep. You can do this exercise. They don't even realize you're doing it. Yeah, exactly. And so here it is. So there's a series of, it goes 1, 4, 2. So we're going to breathe in deeply when I say so for 5 seconds. We're going to hold it for 20 seconds. And then we're going to exhale for 10 seconds. Okay? Good thing I talk fast because I'll count fast. Okay? So when we breathe in, we're going to breathe in deeply through our nose, and I'm going to count for you. So on the count of 3, you're going to take a big, deep breath in. So 1, 2, 3, big, deep breath in. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now hold it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Nice deep exhale. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Deep. And breathe in. And sometimes you're breathing out. You're like, there's nothing left. And then you keep breathing out and you're pushing it out. You do 3 of those back to back, and you do it a couple times a day. Well, at first you might. So you might have to do like 3 seconds breathing in, right? 15 seconds holding it, right? 6 seconds exhaling. Free divers do this. They'll do these exercises where they can hold their breath for a long period of time, right? But you'll get an infusion of energy by doing that. So you can create, people I've coached, I've said, hey, when you're at a stoplight, that's a trigger point, do the breathing exercise, right? Or you're sitting at your computer, you can build it into your calendar to do these a couple times a day, and you'll get an extra amount of energy. And why is that important? Because when you are alert and you have energy and something comes at you, an obstacle that you weren't expecting, you don't get derailed. You don't get emotionally hijacked. You can calm and collectively say, let me think this through. Okay? The next one. Smile and laugh more. Right? Life's so short. We get so serious. Right? Laugh at yourself. Laugh at your behavior. Laugh at your mistakes. Right? Joke around with people. Laugh with people, not at people. Right? Or they might attack you. The third one, visualize yourself succeeding. Olympic athletes do this. And they found that they can run MRI tests, right, brain scans, and the same neural connections in your brain light up when they're visualizing the activity versus if they're physically doing it. So very powerful. So earlier you wrote down that person's name in your notebook. That might be an exercise. You think about that person saying, okay, what does an incredible relationship look like with this person? And literally spend some time visualizing what that would look like. How would you be communicating? How would you be spending time together? How would you be supporting them? Would they be supporting you? And going through that exercise can help you. Great opportunity, too, to do this with your goals. Bless you. And so forth. Number 4, make your goals public. Right? So tell other people what you're working on. Right? Accountability. So, one of the times that when I'm home that I absolutely love is putting my girls to sleep. So at night, we put them, get cleaned up, lay down, and I ask them, hey, what happened today? What did you learn today? What's the most incredible thing that happened? And then we always ask, hey, what about tomorrow? What do you want to create? If you could create anything, what would it be? And one time I was having a conversation with my daughter, and I said, hey, one of the things I'm working on is staying calm, cool, and collective when you and your sisters get me worked up, push my buttons. And so I said, when you see me doing that, can you just look at me, when you see my nonverbal and I'm raising my voice, and ask a question, say, Dad, how's it going working on your patience? Right? So I didn't think anything of it. A couple weeks go by, and we're driving in the car, and my 3 girls are having a scream fest. Wah! All of them. And I'm just like, I'm like, I'm going to crash this car. Quiet! And I look over my shoulder, and my middle, Haley, looks at me and goes, Dad, how are you doing working on that patience? And I was like, and she's got that smirk. And it reminded me, and right then, the association that I couched with that in my mind was in 15 years, they will not be in my car, and they will not be wanting to spend time, most likely, with me. So cherish this moment while I have it. And it instantly changes me from screaming and freaking out to, you know what, be happy that I've got kids. Okay? So very, very powerful technique. Make your goals public to people that can help support you and help make you consciously aware of what's going on. Because the first thing is becoming consciously aware before you can work on it. The last one, personal hierarchy of needs. Okay? So this is taking care of yourself. Right? Realize how much sleep do you need in a night to operate at your peak level. Is it 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours? Right? 8 hours? What type of exercise do you need? Right? What type of food? When you eat it, how does it make you feel? When do you crash? Right? All those things will impact the way you manage yourself and lead and influence other people around you. Okay? So as we close up, when you see this picture, what do you see? What comes to your mind? Knowledge, wisdom. What's that? Ask for a bathroom? Okay. Someone in the other group said that he was on his way to the cemetery. Loneliness. Determination. Cowboy. Retirement. So Emerson once said, how we experience the world influences how we see it. So how we experience it influences how we see it, right? And some things need to be believed to be seen, right? So what if I told you that he was walking down the street playing the saxophone, right? Jamming out. He could be in New Orleans having fun right now, right? And so how you see the world will often create the world you live in. And that's key to know when you're dealing with relationships. So if you're going into a relationship trying to make it the best, often you're going to make it. Okay? So as we wrap up, what I would ask you is if we're not connected on LinkedIn, I encourage you to send me a LinkedIn connection. I will accept it. I appreciate you taking the time to join the breakout. If you enjoyed it, fill out the survey in the app. Give some positive feedback because we're looking at possibly driving this material deeper into the organization. So your feedback is important for that. And the last one is I've got some books that I'm going to give. I've got probably about 40 to 50 of them. So the first 40 to 50 folks, I'll give them. And within the book, there's an actual assessment. There's an EQ test that you can go online, put in the code. I don't see the scores, but it'll score you in 4 areas. It'll score you in self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship management. And it'll give you a lot more strategies and tools beyond what I gave you today that you can work on for 90 days. And then you go and take the test again, and it'll show how you improved. So thank you for your time and enjoy the summit. Awesome. You want hard copy or audio?
I want a hard copy. I love to read.
Okay. Hard copy or audio? So it's MP3. Hard copy or audio?